Looks like I've got sound, and we're ready to go there. And we'll have some folks join us, I'm certain. I just want to do some quick housekeeping so that we're on track in terms of what's going on. The syllabus is always a good place to go first to see what's due when. You've got a quiz. XLS 4 and 5, we've already done those, so those should have been turned in and we had the files. And then we've got on the 21st, the first exam 1, part 1, and then exam 2 is an upload, and I've got the instructions and everything in there for that. We've covered XLS 6, and we've also covered 7, and those are in there in the files section. So let me go back over to the files for a minute. Well, we're starting a little bit early, and we're going to be out of here a little bit after 7, maybe 7:15 tonight. But we're up to, we're going to start on case 8 tonight, but we have done 4, 5, 6, 7, and I have also a couple of 7 files there, in fact. But this is the one probably for hardware, and that's the best one to use. Badger Jams, that's published. So everybody ought to be in good shape. We've got 15, and I'll go ahead and publish that in case someone should have an issue in terms of, so I've got that out there too. Now, okay, that was 8, but I wanted to do 5. Okay, well, that's all right. I've got 8 published, and so you'll have it 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're working on case number 8 tonight, and Tuesday we worked on case 7. Case 8 is over on page 76, and this is Action Plastics. So we've got a solution file, and I want to open it up for just a couple of minutes and let everybody see it. And you can upload it, and then you can download it to your computer and then upload it if you want. And we'll talk about it. And what we're doing here is we're continuing on with developing and using conditional statements. Now, I want to walk you through this solution file that's here, and let's see who all is with us here. And I see Matthew and Allison. Thanks. Glad to have you here. And this is Action Plastics. It's case number 8. It's over on page 76. And they start about this company. They make parts and so forth, and they have to handle a monthly insurance invoice. And they talk about there in 76. As usual, they give you some information about the case. And then they're at the bottom of 76. They start to give us some data for our assumptions area. And the rates for that year are $240 for 0 dependents, $312 for 1 dependent, that's an employee plus a spouse or child, and $440 for 2 or more dependents, that's the employee plus two or more dependents. So we have some tiers there in terms of the pricing, and those are basically the assumptions. Now, in that second paragraph on page 77, the author talks about the fact that they pay for the employee portion of the insurance premium, okay, while the employee is responsible for the dependent portion through a payroll deduction. So he's got to inform payroll of the person responsible and how much, and so they want to develop a little file that will help them deal with this. And then there's another task at the end where they have us do a little bit of sorting with the data. So let's just go again, and we'll kind of put this in and if you missed, don't worry, you can catch it on the recording at the front end. So any of you who join or come in, don't get panicky. It's there to see. Now, the first piece of all of this, of course, obviously, is the documentation part. We got this part over here, and you could, if you wanted to, go ahead and fill it out, the author, your name, etc. Then we have the assumptions, okay, and which is the second piece of the, which is the second part of any good spreadsheet. And then you have the computation and the output area. So we've got those three pieces there, and what I did is went ahead and color coded them. And if you wanted, you could come down here and finish that table off, and we'll just do a little bit of that pretty work here, and I'll put in a nice purple that'll match what's above there. And then we could probably move this over smudging. These are wrap text. And how do I know? Well, I can see it above in the screen up here. And we have the last name of the employee, their first name, the number of dependents they have, the company's share, which will always be $240, the employee share based upon the number of people, the number of dependents, and then of course a total premium. So let's look at that for just a minute. Now there are a couple of ways that you could have done this. One is to use conditional statement, or you could try to use a VLOOKUP, and we're going to get to VLOOKUPs a little bit later in the course, but on this one we're just going to start with the conditional statement. So they wanted us to add some, they're on number 3 on page 77, and they ask us first of all to add a couple more employees. And so Devon Jackson and Pavan Kumar, and they give us the number of dependents they have, and they're there. And so the raw file, okay, it doesn't have everything sorted or anything like that, but we're looking at it's a finished product. And again, you know, you can catch this on the front end, because I'm starting a little bit early, so I can get us out of here about 7:10, 7:15 at the very latest. So, and then be on the lookout, because tomorrow or Saturday, probably tomorrow, I'll do another supplemental lab, so we have our minutes of class that we need to have. But up in this assumption area, we first start with the company share. Okay, this is case number 8 over in Atlas Plastics, and we have some assumptions, and there are these: the company's share, we have the employee's share if they have 0 dependents, and the employee's share if they have 1, and the employee's share if they have 2 or more dependents. Okay, so it's pretty obvious if you look over here in column D that 240 is the base amount. Now, if you look there, and I think I've got the file open, so let me go back and make sure everybody. I opened the file up and it's published. It's called XLS8 SP15. So that's the solution file. So you can open that up and take a look at it. Okay, and I've got it published so we can talk about it and how it's put together. It's not that complex, and you know, it's what it is. But again, it's working with a couple of things: the name manager and working with some conditional formatting. So it's over in the files area there in Canvas, and it's going to be it's XLS8 SP15, and I save versions of these that I think are okay. Now back to the file. I went ahead and created the assumptions area, and we have we have 4 assumptions: the company's share, okay, and what they pay, and then the employee's share, which is driven by the number of dependents that they have. Is if they have 0 dependents, the employee's share is 0. The company just pays $240, and they're over and done. If the employee has 1 dependent, then the employer pays $240. And the employee pays $72. So the total is going to be $312. Okay, and you can infer that from the verbiage there at the bottom of page 76 and the top of page 77. And if you say, okay, these are all word problems in a lot of senses, yes, they are, until you get down to the tasks, and then you start to deal with them. So again, those of you who've come in late, don't worry, you can backtrack on the video, and then go ahead and then you know where to pick up the file. Now, if they have 2 or more dependents, they pay the employee pays $200. So, you know, if there's no dependents, the total premium is $240. Okay, If there's one dependent, the total premium is $312. And if there are two or more dependents, the total premium is $440. Okay? And we got that. Now, let's take a look here for just a minute because I've created this table. Now, like I said before, there are two ways I could go about this. I could use the conditional statement, which we do, or I could use the VLOOKUP, okay, and use the VLOOKUP. But we're going to do that a little bit later in the course. So we're just going to do a straight up plain vanilla, just using some conditional formatting. Before we do that, now I've kind of prettied up the file, okay, and I've added a company share, employee share, and total premium. Okay, so it's all very intuitive. This first, in the skeleton file, these first three columns are provided, okay, and then I added these three other columns, all right, and then I just bolded all that and put a nice color around it so I could differentiate the output and processing, the calculation in the output area from the assumptions. So the case looks a little bit complex, but it's really not. And once you kind of see how to walk through it, it becomes pretty simple. Now, what we're going to do is click on formulas, okay? And I want to show you and we're going to see the name manager, okay? And if you've got your phone on out there in TV land, go ahead and put it on mute. We don't want to hear your dog bark or hear you guzzle beer or whatever you're doing while we're here working like slaves, working very, very hard. Anyway, but you'll notice I've got four. I've used the name manager, and I've got four of them defined. Okay, and one of them is the company share, and then you'll see the name. You'll see the name of that, and then the value, and then it will refer you to the particular cell or cell range, and then the scope, whether it's a workbook or whatever. So we've got the company share, then we have the employee share with 0 dependents, then we have the employee share with 1 dependent, and then we have the employee share with 2 or more. And notice, okay, if you look, you know, you're going to see that we've got those defined, okay, and what they refer to there in action plastics. So we're good to go so far, and now we're ready. And you can see we're looking at J1, J2, J3, J4. There they are. Now the value of this, as we've talked about before, is it leaves you and me from having to do a whole lot of cell referencing work to define a variable that's in a given cell and just use it in the formula. And so I want to show you that and what we did there. And I'm gonna close this off, and we'll look first of all at the company share. Okay. Okay. And notice it says equal company share. Now, if you look up in the formula bar, okay, you're going to see the name. So what we've done is we've created a variable, or really a constant, and then we've plugged in a value. And so the value is down here in the processing area, down in the table, but up above here in the formula area, it shows up as company share. Okay. That's why using the name manager is such an advantage for you, because you're not disoriented by cell referencing. You've got variables that you're working with. Does that make sense? Okay. And it takes a little bit of extra time to do that, but it always is in your best interest. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to show you just using this in a formula, and I'm going to click equal. Okay, and I'm going to take the employee share. I'm going to do this. I'm going to equal here for a minute. I'll come up into the formula bar. I'm going to put equal, okay, and then I'm going to click using a formula, and I'll do company share, and then I'm going to do plus, am I using a formula, employee zero dependents. Now notice what you get. If you look there, you'll see the 240 is in blue, along with the 240 is in blue, that share, that cell, okay, and then the cell for zero dependents, that's red. But this makes a lot more sense than saying, you know, J1 plus J2. Okay, I can't emphasize this enough, and I know I'm harping on a lot, but first of all, it's helpful for you keeping everything straight. And in addition, if you have to do something on the fly, okay, it's going to be a lot easier for you to do that. So I just wanted to show you that, and you can perform the operation using those variables, and so you're good to go. I'm going to escape from that, and we're done there. Now, if you look, I've got the company share, and now because I've got that defined, I can just take the company share and I can just drag and drop this as far as I want to. Okay, so if I had 1,000 or 50 or how many ever I have, I'm good to go. Okay, if I come down, you'll just see it. Cell referencing and getting organized in that manner, I think, is about 90% of spreadsheeting and developing these kinds of little tools or dashboards. And this is actually kind of a dashboard, if you will, and I'll show you here in a minute. We'll add a little element or two to this thing so that you can see it. Now we come over to the employee share. Okay, and here we have the first conditional statement, and it's a doozy. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to take, and I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to take it on the notepad, okay? Now I'm going to put it up here so you can see it. Now, there in at the end of each of these cases, the authors will give you a tutorial. For example, for case 8, there's an Excel tutorial for 78, and they have you keep working with a file. I think it's called course, and you can do that if you want to. But again, I don't know that it's all that big of a deal. But let's look at this for a minute. The conditional statement is, and there, well, the tutorial is helpful in the sense, if you look on page 78, they'll show you the elements of a conditional statement. Equal if, condition, equal if, parenthesis, condition. Okay, in other words, we're doing a test. What do we do if it's true? What do we do if it's false? Okay, that's a simple conditional statement. Now, if I make a more complex one, what I do is I say, okay, I check for a condition, and if it's true, then I'll see a comma and I'll move on to the next check for the condition till I finally come to a default. Okay, it might be 0, it might be 1. Okay, and someone's got their phone on. We'll turn that down. Now, let me pop this back up here. Let's take a look at it. It says equal if, okay, C8, and here I'm using, okay, cell reference, equal if C8 is greater than or lesser than 2, okay, then employees share 2 or more. So I reference to that cell. Then I have a comma which says, okay, if the condition's not met, continue on. And the next is if C8 equals 1, okay, then it would be the employees share 1 dependent. If that condition is not met, another comma, and if C8 equals 0, then it would be employees share 0 dependents, and then I add 3 parentheses to balance the parentheses. So I'm just checking as I go along. Got it? Now it's just watch what we do. Equal if C8, and C8 is that cell there on the number of dependents, equal to or greater than 2, then it's the employee's share of 2 or more. And because we named that already, okay, as cell J4, it's going to just show up as employee's share of 2 or more. Then a comma, which says to the machine, continue on if the condition's not met. If, parenthesis, C8 equals 1, if that's true, then it would be the employee's share 1 dependent. Okay? Now, that's actually cell J3, but we renamed it because we used the name manager to rename it. Then comma, if C8 equals 0, okay, then it would be employees share 0 dependents. And rather than, and at that point, rather than have the J2 reference, we reference to the name. And then we close it out with 3 balancing parentheses. Now, the only thing that's not exactly what it ought to be here is, if I really want to be persnickety, I'd put a $sign in front of the C because I'm coming down the column. Okay? So that would be the only thing that I would do that would change it. But I get away with it, I think, because I'm using some good referencing here anyway. But I'm going to look at this, and notice what will happen. Then it changes to C9. Now, always to be on the safe side, you may want to just go ahead, and if you're working with a column, you know, put the $sign in front of it. What I like to do is put the $sign in front of it, see if it works, and if it doesn't work, then I leave it off. Okay, because I'm kind of a lazy slug. But I would want a $sign in front of the C18 because I'm talking about coming down the column. But I've got enough, I think I have enough anchoring there with this, and I'll put this back up here again. That I think I have enough of an anchor that the machine gets what I'm doing because I'm consistently coming down the column. Okay? So far? Now, if I did this real time, came in here to write the conditional statement, just to save myself the time and hassle, just to stop any kinds of feelings of panic, because you can get those when you know what you want to get, but you got to get it done. I work in a notepad, then I copy and paste to see if it works. I don't go up here in the formula bar and try to work with it. And what I'll do is I'll move this down where I can see everything, so I know what cells I'm after. Now, the only thing I could do on this to improve it, okay, would be to define C18. But then, I'm looking at some issues, okay. And so away we go. Now, I'm going to close it off for just a minute. And I'll come up here. And we've got the company amounts. And this is C8. So I could put the $sign in front. Really, I can't define that C8 because then I'm going to have to define every single cell. So I'm just going to define the assumption cells. So I apologize about that. I would use the cell reference for the employee share figure there in C8. To test C8, excuse me, number of dependents. Okay? And I'll click this and you'll see it go hot. C8's always blue. Then the employee share of 2 or more, it goes red. Then the employee share of 1 dependent goes purple. And then the employee share with 0 dependents goes green. And it's giving me those visual cues. Okay? But I always work in the notepad so I can see what the whole thing and write it out. And I paste it in, and if I get it right, if I mess it up. Now, one of the things I could do also here is notice, I'll punch this back up here for a sec. Notice what I do in the very first condition check. I use if C18, okay, and I was down in C18, is greater than or equal to 2. I could have used if C18 equals 2, okay, employee share 2 or more, comma, if C18 is greater than 2. You see how I combined those into a greater or equal than? Because that's the condition I've established up here. If the employee has 2 or more dependents, boom, their share is $200. Okay? And that's pretty much all there is to it. And then it just becomes an issue of a drag and a drop. But the key thing is I created the assumptions area, I named the variables, okay? And then I just use them so I can drag and drop either across or down. But I'm always, as much as I can automate a spreadsheet, I do that. And one of the ways I do is to do a drag and drop sequence. Now, I'm going to come over and look at the total premium. And here we are. This equals the sum of D8 through E8. That's employee share. Okay. And then I could just come down, drag and drop, and I've got it, the total premium. And that's all that really is going on there in that case. The whole thing being, again, the name manager, becoming comfortable using a conditional statement. We prettied up the output area a little bit. We set off the assumptions area a little bit. But we worked with just that basic thing, as they talk about there in the textbook on page 78. The conditional statement, equal if, comma, condition. If the condition's met, i.e. the action if true. If the condition is false. Now, if we want to continue checking conditions, then we just put a comma, and then we'd put if, parenthesis, and we could go on indefinitely checking the potential conditions. Now, we could also use a VLOOKUP on the table. I'm going to save that for us to do that in a later case when it makes a whole lot more sense. But once you kind of see this, okay, then a conditional statement ought to be fairly, you should have a pretty good comfort level. And always remember, when we do a nested conditional statement, if you look in the middle of page 78, you have equal if, parenthesis, the condition, the action if true, comma, the action if false, and a parenthesis. Or if you're going to check some more, another comma, if, parenthesis. Okay, so you only have one equal sign in the whole thing, not multiple equal signs. And that you may see that somewhere, and remember that I told you that. Okay, now they also ask us to do a little bit of a sort and filter on this. Okay, and you say, what are you talking about? If you look over there at page 77 on task number 4, sort the data in order by number of dependents and then by employee last name. Okay, what we have now is a sort operation that has a primary sort and a secondary sort. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to highlight everything from cell A7 down to F18, okay? And then I'm going to click Home, and I'm going to come all the way over to the editing. And everybody see the little sort and filter thing? Okay, click on it, and you'll see a custom sort. Got that? Now click it, and you're going to see the sort that currently exists. Now there's some things on the dialog box that you want to make sure when you do something like this. First of all, my data has headers. The headers are the last name, the first name, employees, a number of dependents, company share, employee share, total premium. Got it? So always make sure. You never want to have a table with no headers, because what happens is it starts trying to sort no values, and you don't need that. Then you have the primary sort, which is the very first one. That's your first one. That's why we call it the primary sort, and also because it's the one executed first. So you'll notice we've got the number of dependents, okay, by values, and we chose to go largest to smallest. We could have gone smallest to largest if we wanted to, but we went from largest to smallest. We want to find out which of our employees are paying the higher premiums. It's going to matter to them, and it's going to matter to the insurer as well. The more dependents they have, the greater the risk pool. Okay? That's why you come down here, and it gives you just a quick chance to talk about insurance just a little bit, how that is all handled. Insurance is based on risk pools, okay? Meaning people who have a certain lifestyle, age, blah, 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 they get charged an amount of money for insurance, okay? And there's an amount charged that's based upon the risk they are for the insurer. Insurance companies are actually legalized gambling, okay? If mom and daddy took a policy out, one of those little Gerber policies out on you when you were, 1 or 2, sometimes you'll see them on 50,000. Gerber was betting 50 grand that you won't die before age 21. But I guarantee you, there's no way Gerber will sell you a premium mileage at that low level. It ain't going to happen. And you say, will life insurance premium, is it high for you now? No, because I was smart enough when I was young to get in on the when I was there. Now, I've had some increments, not like someone who was. So there's a little bit of a message here in terms of the risks the company's willing to pay, but the number of people involved in that pool changes the risk pool. Now, we also have this thing sorted by last name, and that's just an organizing thing, and we have it by A to Z, and this is what we call a secondary sort. So we have a primary, a secondary sort, and notice everybody, okay, who has 3 dependents is listed first. Then they're listed in alphabetical order. Everybody who has 2 dependents is listed next, and they're listed in alphabetical order. And then those who have 1 dependent, ditto. Those who have 0 dependents, okay? You say, could you add another what you would call a tertiary level to this? Sure, I could add level, and I'm going to do that. Click add level. Okay, and we've got, and instead of last name, one was number of dependents, and then I'm going to click on employee share, largest to smallest, and then I have them by last name. And it's going to look a little different, not too much, because the employee share flows along. Now, if you ever want to, you can come back in and you can click on the custom sort, and you can eliminate these. You have some options to move them up, move them down, get rid of them, etc. This is something important I want to make sure that you get, because it'll show up on an exam one of these days, and it's also an important thing to understand. There's a difference between filtering and sorting. When I filter, I'm working just with records. In other words, the rows. When I'm working with when I'm doing a sort, I'm working with variables. I'm working with attributes, i.e. columns. Okay? Now, I can fiddle around and get pretty much the same thing, but I want to be certain that it makes sense for me to do a filter when maybe I need to do a sort. Again, a filter will just get me records. A sort lets me take these variables and do something with them. Okay? Now, we got one final thing you could say, okay, is there anything we can do with this to make it a little bit nicer? Well, yeah, we could. Okay? We can come over here on the total premium, or we can take the employee share and take your cursor and put it on E8, okay? And then come over and we can do a conditional format, okay? And we're going to do color shades, okay? But this time we're going to use the second one to show red is the highest value. You and I are used to seeing typically green, yellow, red when we drive, okay? But when we look at like, you know, if you look at like the weather and you look at a map of the storms, the rains, or winds, you'll see red is usually the highest to alert us to the fact that it's really high. And then we have those that are yellow or then a light green. There's just not much enough differentiation between these. Now, this is going to be somewhat useful if you've got 1,000 of these records. Again, it's just a way to provide them some visualization. But that's really all there is. Really all there is with case number 8. Okay, and I want to just real quickly go back over it again. Okay, notice that the first thing after we had created these, the name manager. And I'll open it up again. Click on formulas. Now we got the name manager. Now we can use these name managers because the name managers refer to a value. Okay? And so we can work with that. So notice what we did here. Company share. Okay? And we just came right down because that's what it was. And then we did we did the conditional statement to find out what was the employee share based upon whatever the situation was. And then bingo, we did and then we did the total, and that's all there is to it. Okay. And again, you might find a different way to write the conditional statement and to get the same results. Okay. Use whatever works and whatever seems to make sense to you. Okay. So that's really it. Now, if you get comfortable using conditional statements like this, it really becomes a nice tool for you. And like I've said before, we'll move into a stage where we'll take a look at and we'll use VLOOKUP, and we'll create a table where we'll do a lookup, a vertical lookup, and that one is going to be a nice one. We got through this pretty well, and we've got some time. So go ahead and save this to your desktop, okay? And then you want to save it as, and they're on your computer and on your desk. I want to save it on the desktop. And you could save it as XLS8, and then XLS8, and then upload it to the bin where you upload it when it's due. Okay. Now we're going to move on to one that's a little more interesting, and that will take us through to number 9. So I'm going to close off number 8. Question? Anybody? Huh? To where it says XLS8. Yeah, we're working ahead, and there's a reason we are. Let me explain to you why we're working ahead. because when we hit the access cases, most of the time, students have had little, if any, experience with access, and so it's a real startling thing, and probably don't have much knowledge of databases. And so we have 6 database cases, and they get progressively more difficult. So what I like to do is give us some slack time, if we need to stop and work and build and work through them. So, and you're used to working with spreadsheets, you have comfort level with them, and so I work us ahead, knowing that we're going to come to a point where we'll kind of hit a wall there, and that's all right, because once you've got that down, you're good to go. All I can tell you is, I told this to the folks taking data admin today. I don't know how many times a month I get somebody a message from somebody in LinkedIn, or somebody sends me an email that says, I got a job at XYZ company because I was the only applicant who had any real proficiency with working with databases. Everybody's working with spreadsheets, and by the time you're finished, you'll have worked with Access, SQL. You'll have seen and worked a little bit with Oracle. You'll have been exposed to SAP and what their product offers, and SAS Visual Analytics. In other words, you'll have a skill set that very few people coming out of school have, and very few people out there working are going to have. And all I can tell you is databases are having that skill set, having the ability and the comfort level of working with them and knowing what they can do, okay, is just, it makes you so much more employable and gets employers a little bit more enthused about you. So we're going to close this off, okay, and this is XLS8, and we're going to take a look at XLS9. So let's go over to page 81, and that's XLS9, and that's Karma Digital, okay? And that's a little bit different critter, because in Karma, what we're going to do here is we're going to work with correlation, and we're going to work with linear regression in Excel. Okay. Now, when we talk about linear regression, we're talking about what we call the Cartesian plane, and I have some files over in the resources area about XY relationships. In fact, I have one over there on those on the XY relationship and how they work in business. So I'm going to click over on let's see, I think I'm going to go back up here into the modules. And if we don't get through the whole thing tonight, we'll just, we can finish it tomorrow, and click welcome. And it's not over here, it's going to be at the supplemental website. In fact, I think click on the supplemental website link. And let's go over there. Okay. And we're going to find the XY relationship. And let me scroll down through here. Here it is, the XY paradigm. It's a PowerPoint. Download it, and we'll talk about it a little bit, okay? So you want to download the PowerPoint, and this is just talks about this notion of the XY paradigm. Now, when we work with data, we really try to understand, particularly if we're trying to make predictions, the extent to which we know how much the change in one aspect of the variable produces a change in the other. When you work with what we call a Cartesian plane, we're working with a vertical axis, a horizontal axis, and then quadrants, okay? And we might assume that in this northeast quadrant, that when one variable goes up, the other goes up. Same thing in the northwest quadrant. In the southeast quadrant, we might assume that one thing goes down, the other goes down. Now, this relationship between variables, for example, increases in the interest rates mean there's a fall in the home sales. When interest rates go down, home sales go up, okay? So we're going to go through the slideshow here, hopefully. And maybe that'll work. And maybe it won't. Get us out of this for a second. Now, I usually don't like to do death by PowerPoint, but I do think it's important to get you to understand that having some insights about how things get related is very, very important, because you got to see the enterprise as a whole, okay? Now, we talk about the XY chart, the Y-axis. This is the dependent variable, okay? That's what we call a variable of interest. And the vertical, and it's also known as the ordinate. Then the X-axis, that's the independent variable. It's the one that we manipulate. That's kind of a sketchy term. It's vertical. So we have the abscissa and the ordinate, Y and X. And these are based upon the Cartesian plane. And you go, oh, leave me alone. I understand. Now, we look at the slope, okay, the rise and the run, to see how two things progress together. Does one go up? A good example is what we call price elasticity. Price elasticity is a concept that says, okay, if I raise, for every percentage increase in the price of my good or good and service bundle, is there how much of a decrease is there? Is it 1-to-1? So if I raise the prices 1%, demand goes down 1%? Or is it much more sensitive where I raise a percentage and the sales go down 2%? Or is it relatively inelastic where I can charge what I want? I'll guarantee you there are some items in the world that there is no price elasticity. One of them is quadruple bypass. I frankly doubt that if the day ever comes and one of you, God forbid, or me, is being rolled in for a quadruple bypass, that you're going to stop the doctor and go, how much is this going to cost? Is there a discount this week? I got some Groupons here. You're not. You're clutching that thing going, do whatever it did, whatever it costs, it's my life. Okay? So that's an inelastic good. Okay? And people will pay any price to do that. On the other hand, we've got some goods that fluctuate, and when the price goes up, people stop buying them. Okay? Now, we look at the slope. That's the rise and the run. Okay? The rise and the run, to see if there's a linear trend, something that we can use to make predictions. You see, one of the challenges for us, okay, in business is we're really good at getting data that tells us what happened. How much we sold last year, what profit margin we made last year, but we're not too good at being able to look ahead and say, if I continue doing business as I am, what will things look like? Okay, that's a more challenging and difficult situation, but that's almost how we have to run our business. If you run your business solely on the annual reports you get, no matter how good they are, it's kind of like driving down the expressway looking in your rearview mirror. It will get ugly fast. So we look at some of those relationships, and they're positive, negative, or neutral. Here's a positive correlation. And we assume that things relate to a certain extent like this. Now, this is not just about math. It's a way of thinking. It's important, especially for marketers, who have to say, if I'm going to raise the price, what will people want in exchange for the increased price for my car or whatever it is I'm selling? If I drop the price, will I increase my sales? Okay? And we talked about this a little bit when we talked about total cost curve. We talked about contribution margin. And so we want to know how much positive correlation is there. And we're going to see in this case, we'll take a look at one. Here's the negative correlation, okay? The higher we go in Y, the lower we go in X, okay? Now, it's an interesting thing that at the end of World War II, okay, we had, in terms of around the world, we had, at the end of World War II, we had about a dozen known armed conflicts. Okay? Since then, we around the world, particularly in developing countries, there has been more weapons sold, more firepower accumulated than in the history of the world. And now we have about, at any given time, about 2,000 known armed conflicts going on all over the world, of one scale, size, or the other. So the more weapons we tend to make and sell, the lower our true security is. Although we would think that if we have all these weapons, we'd be secure. A good case in point is all the jockeying around with our friend in North Korea. He's a punk. He's got one nuclear missile that might make it through reentry. We've got 4,000. Why are we even talking about him? I think the American League playoffs are far more interesting than Kim Jong-un, but he's filled the news. He fires one missile, he's dust. He knows that. He's playing us. Okay? And what we need to do is send Dennis Rodman back over there and deal with him. I mean, he's a big NBA fan. Get him tickets to the NBA finals. Let him buy an NBA franchise. We know what the guy likes. But everything in the United States is all shook up. You got one missile. He's got 4,000. We have 4,000. The question is, if he presses the button and we press the button, will everybody press the button? Now, since we have all these missiles we built, we have zero security. There was a concept in the 1950s that was called mutually assured destruction. And that was the people in the Soviet Union understood if they fired, we'd fire. And we'll probably kill everybody on Earth. So we kind of had a feeling of, well, yeah, today's not the day. We came close a few times. Or there's no correlation. Okay, what we call a null or neutral correlation. They don't fluctuate on the basis of anything of a linear trend. I want to show you some other trends that we can try to look at as we try to understand. One is called the yield curve. Now the yield curve, here's the normal yield curve on the bottom. Over time, interest rates should go up. If you borrow money from me and say, I'll pay you back tomorrow, I'm going to charge a lot less interest than I would if you borrow money from me and say, I'll pay you back in 20 years. But if things are sketchy, if economic conditions are sketchy, if I'm afraid about the future, if I'm concerned about what's going on, then we have a thing called the inverted yield curve. And that is where people will charge less interest for money that's due later on down the road because everybody's thinking there may not be a later on down the road. We've had some inverted yield curves a few times in our history. The last one was just right before we had the housing crisis. And the one before that was the Great Recession at the end of the 1970s when the oil prices went out the roof. So we understand these relationships, okay? And in any industry, you're going to have relationships. So we need to be thinking about that. Now here's one that shows interest rates versus stock prices, okay? And the number of common shares. And we know that over time, the interest rates, as interest rates go up, the price of common shares goes down. Why? Costs more to do business. This is what we call stock variability, or beta. On the y-axis is the return on the stock. On the bottom is the market return. Okay, and then we have a thing called the stock characteristic line, and we have a stock beta. That is how much it varies. A highly variable stock price you don't want. You want one that just trudges on and gains value. Okay. Then we have the risk-reward paradigm. The return we get the higher the return, the higher the risk. Okay? As I've said before, it's unfortunate for you that we don't offer a course in the history of business because it's fascinating stuff. And I might have told you about it before, but if you've ever heard of Lloyd's of London, they were the first real insurance company, commercial insurance company. And the way that Lloyd's of London, and you've heard people say, I'm an insurance underwriter. Lloyd's of London would say, okay, they'd have a board, and they'd post, here's a ship headed to North America and the Caribbean to pick up tobacco and to pick up spices or to pick up spices we can use for rum. Okay, now it's a boat. It's 90, maybe 100 feet long, maybe 30 feet, 40 feet wide in the middle of the ocean. No GPS, no navigation. So our friends who came over, they had some serious courage. If you've ever been in the middle of the ocean, you think about how small those boats are, you go, wow. But risk and reward. So the people at Lloyd's would say, all right, how many of you want to sign on for this? If they come back in 3 years, we'll get a 30 or 40% return on our money. If they don't show up, pirates, die at sea in a storm, or they get there and they get dysentery and they all die, you lost your money. And so you wrote your name down and you pledged a certain amount to help fund it. It's called underwriting. Lots of interesting things like that are out there. Well, now there's what we call countercyclicals. These are stocks that sometimes in some conditions, some stocks do very well, and in other conditions, others don't do so well. And industries can have countercyclical kinds of characteristic lines. Okay, if you are in the collection business or the repo business, or you sell used cars, your time is when the economy's bad because people don't want to spend a lot of money. Now, when the economy's good, money's cheap, guess what? You're dying. You can go out and buy a brand new car with next to nothing in terms of interest, with hardly anything down, versus paying money on premium to get a nice late model used car. There's a shortage of them because they were all purchased up during the last financial crisis. So we got some things called countercyclicals. And there's some more here. This is just the opposite. This is the M return. We had a W earlier. And then diversification. Diversification means I develop a portfolio of stocks, or I build a portfolio of businesses, or I have a line of products so that when one is down, the other's up, and I counterbalance everything out. Okay? Now, all I can say is I'm going to give another advertisement for Dr. Reader's class on personal finance. If you're smart to take it, if you don't, it's tragedy if you don't know how to handle everybody's money but your own. The other thing I would say to you is this is, with the training, when you take a finance course, think about this and think about the fact that at different think of yourself and your family as a corporation, and at different stages of time, you want to have your money. Now, when I was your age, I had 95% of my assets in really risky stuff because I knew I had another 35, 40, 50 years to make it back if I lost it. At this point now, I am in everything that is as solid as I can get, and it doesn't give me much of a return, but if I lost it, I wouldn't able to be I would never be able to recover it. So during the back in the mid 267, 28, during the housing crisis, before that, because of my age, I had moved everything over. I only had about 3% in what you would consider risky venture. And everybody's laughing at me going, hey, I'm making 18, 19, 20%. They're making 1.5. Ha, ha, ha. And then overnight, their portfolio's wiped out. One of them, I called him, I said, how you doing? He said, I'm back to about 1984. I said, what do you mean? He said, that's where my portfolio is in terms of value. So I've just lost 20 years of my life. I'm sorry. So think about that, risk and return. And you want to try to diversify that risk away. Now, there's also some things called complementary goods, okay? For example, and you've heard this probably in your econ class, hot dogs and buns, okay? They're complementary goods. They go together. And popcorn and soda at the movie, okay? Whatever, okay? But they're goods that when you buy one, you tend to buy the other. People buy an electronic, they want to also get some kind of coverage or warranty for it, okay? And then you have the contribution margin, which we talked about that before, break-even point, units, revenue or cost, the loss area, the profit area. We talked about that when we did Badger Jams. These are not really difficult ideas to grasp. The only problem is that most people, unfortunately, who don't have any training in business, don't believe them. They think, it doesn't apply to me. I'm sorry, it does. It does to all of us. So, when entrepreneurs go out of business and they say, what happened? Usually what happened is they were underfunded in the first place. Or maybe they didn't have the market data they needed. So, food for thought for us. It's just a summary. And this kind of helps us put this case into perspective. We call this course business problem analysis. And you say, well, yeah, but we've done a lot of work with spreadsheets. Any server number to the access. Those are just tools to take us to a point where we say, for example, if I'm working for an employer and they provide insurance, they're paying some of the freight for me, just like I pay. So I ought to recognize the employer's contribution. It's the same thing as when we looked at that Guardian payroll. If my employer hires me, they've just made an investment, okay? And when we looked at Badger Jams, we saw for an entrepreneur what kind of courage it takes. Because you remember our entrepreneur in that case was going to take a year off from work and use $64,000 or whatever it was to live on. You go start your own business, that takes some courage. And so we looked at that. We looked at the trying to manage your inventory, the economic order quantity, trying to make sure that I balance off the cost of holding versus the cost of ordering. Now, if I'm Hellsberg's Jewelers, or I'm Shane Company, or I'm anyone K Jewelers, or any of those jewelry companies, my cost of ordering diamonds is very low. My cost of holding them is very, very high. Because if one gem walks out the door, I've lost some money. So they have a little bit different ideas about economic order quantity. Okay, all that being said, helps us set up this case that we're going to look at, and that's case number 9. And if we don't get through it, we'll finish it off, or I'll just review it when I do a supplemental. Okay. So don't get too whacked out about it if we don't get through the whole thing tonight. Let's go back over to the files for a minute. Okay, and let's look for XLS9. I should have it in here somewhere for us. Here it is. And I'm going to publish it. I think I have 2 of them here. Which one do I want to do? This is probably going to be a newer one. I'll play with it. Let's open it up. And this is Karma Digital, okay? And it's case number 9. Okay. Now let me walk you through what we've got going on here. This case not only involves understanding relationships between variables, but it also deals with the question of quality and quality control, okay? If you don't have control of the quality of your goods and services or of the stuff you sell the public, you have a problem. If you sell people stuff that doesn't work or it makes them sick, not good, not good, okay? If you have a product service bundle and you don't follow through on it, not good, not good, okay? If you make a promise to a customer and you keep it, wonderful. I ordered some shoes, the shoes came in on time. Aces. If they hadn't come in until next week or 2 or 3 weeks, I'd be an unhappy camper. And I might not trade with them again. And how many of you have ever gone to Sonic and ordered your food and they came out and said, well, we'll have it. I'm sorry. If you can come back in about 3 hours, we'll have your hot dog will be ready. Because we've got some stuff going on and we're kind of busy. Anybody? Doesn't work like that. Okay. So if you encounter an instructor who's a little bit crusty about late work, remember that. Think about it. And the first time you deal with one of your customers, when you're an employer or a business owner, or you've got some employees, and you tell the customer, we're sorry, we promised that we'd have it on the 15th, but it's going to be next month. You'll probably lose a customer. You may lose your job. Okay, so we always want to be thinking about quality control, but most of all, if we're in a production mode of some type. And let's take a look at this. Karma Digital, okay? As I said, we probably won't get through the whole thing. We're going to go about 10, 15 minutes more at the most. This case is about determining a relationship between defects and production values. In other words, okay, production volume. In other words, is there a relationship between the amount of junk I'm sending out the door and the amount of stuff I make? Okay. And there are ways for us to explore that. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the linear regression tool in Excel to help us build that, what we call the line of best fit, and look at the linear trend and compare the actual data versus what we predicted, okay? And then make some further predictions. If you watched much during, or listened much during the hurricane, okay, the meteorologist kept saying, well, we think it's going to go here. And if you were watching, sometimes they'd show several pathways where it might travel. Why? Well, hurricanes don't have road signs. They just kind of go with the flow, literally. They go where they can get fed. That's hot water or warm ocean water. When they get over land, they kind of get scrubbed down. And they'll also go by how far there's a high ridge that will push them back. One of the reasons if we're in Oklahoma, we get so much wacky, crazy weather all the time is we are living in the war zone between the cold of the northern hemisphere and the warmth of the southern hemisphere. We're right in the battleground. We're just like people caught in the middle of a gang war. Pow, pow, pow. We're running tornadoes, hail, 6 feet of snow. Then tomorrow, a lot of wind, 90 miles an hour. Then next day, 105 degrees. You know, that's because we're on that edge. So people, I was a proud moron for many years. I've moved, but I remain a honorary moron. And people said, why did you, there have been 3 or 4 major tornadoes hit more. There's no jinx. It's simple. It's topography and it's weather. And it's a sitting duck. We're right in that place where we have cold and weather. It's like, okay, it's just like an UFC thing where them fights. So here's cold weather, it's in blue. Hot weather comes out in red, and they duke it out. Unfortunately, you and I are in between them as they punch each other out. So we try to do some predicting about what's going to happen with the weather. This is one of the techniques that they'll use, okay, initially to say, okay, here's where we think that the tornado will track, or where we think there will be rain, etc. And we're going to look at this, okay, in terms of what it's all about. Now, let me walk you through real briefly, and I'll give you an overview. And then when I do a supplemental lab, okay, I'll go into detail. What we have, first of all, over here on the right-hand side, okay, these people make DVDs. I don't know why, but they made DVDs. Well, they did. And we have some data there, the year, how much they produced. Then we have some data on the actual percent defective, how much was defective. Then you're going to see a column called the regression line. In other words, the predicted defective percent. Okay? Now, I'm going to click in there in D10, and you'll see it equals the production volume times B10, okay, plus the intercept. And I'm going to click in here, and it'll show us the intercept. This is the equation for a line. And I don't know if you've had stat yet or not, but you'll become acquainted with regression. The whole idea of regression is I build a model of a line, and then I take my actual data points and I see how closely do the data points hug the line. Okay? That's the whole idea behind it. But in here we're looking at the production volume, okay, times B10 plus the intercept. And if you look over there, that intercept, you see there's the production volume, and this is the coefficient. And so we get a predicted value. And then you look at the next line. Let's go down here. You'll see we've got the production volume time for B11 plus the intercept. And so on. And you'll see we've got some data that take us out to 2010. And here are the actual percent defective. Now, let's take a look at the actual percent defective and take a look at the production volume and tell me, do you see a pattern? Is there a pattern in those data? Is there a pattern? Which is? Okay, it's positive. What happens with the percent? What happens with the level of actual defects? What's going on with production volume overall? Is it going up or going down? Okay, how about our defects? It's going up. So the more stuff we make, the more junk we send out the door. That's the American way. Okay. More is better. Think about this. I made 20 million units. 6% of them were defective. How many units were defective? Raw number. Anybody tell me? What's 6% of 20 million? Well, what would be 10% of 20 million? Yeah, 2 million would be 10% of 20 million. So 6% would be what? That's okay. You guys have an Excel in front of you?
18,800,000.
Okay. So you're talking 6.6. You're talking how many? 18,000? Out of that, you'd have about 6.6. Let's just do the math. Here you have one of the world's greatest you've got calculators, you have Excel, and I go, hey, what's this of this? And everybody's going, huh? Okay, let's try this. Equals, and we'll take this times, and let's see what we get.
you got a ton of so you got a ton of 94 or 0.94.
Yeah. Or you can take 6.6 times 20 million, and you'll get 132,000. You can do it the opposite way. You could take 93.4% are good, but the bad, I have 132,000 units that don't work. I made 20 million. 132,000, is that very many? A lot. What if my projected profit on each of those was $4? Let's do the math. Now I'm talking $500,000 in profit gone. Now, unless you have your own country and print your own money, okay, or you're in Congress, everybody lives on a limited budget. Okay. And so if I've got 6.6% defective, I've got 132,000 defective units. If I lose $4 profit on each one, 4 times that is going to be about $500,000 I've lost. I have a problem. And the problem is that the data, the production volume is going up, and as it does, I send more junk out the door. This is not a good situation. One of the reasons I gave you guys the text, and I'm giving quizzes on the few texts, is so you start to think like this. So you start to look at these numbers and look for patterns. A lot of times you won't get data presented to you in a format that's visually, that has great visual appeal or immediately tells you what's going on. You'll have to kind of train your eyes to start to look for patterns, because you're going to have a lot of people feed you information in columns. Well, we started early. I promise you we leave about 10 after. And we've just got started on this. So what I'm going to do is, my promise to you is, and I know you can't wait, I'll finish up XLS9 on the supplemental, and we'll take a gander at 10. Okay? And please do me a favor. Okay? Stop calling my house wanting to know when I'm going to do the next supplemental broadcast. Please stop it. And don't stand in front of my house and chant case number 10. It's embarrassing. I'm teasing you. I'm kidding you. Folks, thank you for being here. And those of you who are here also, thank you to you. And let's see, I've got Allison, Carmen, Frankie, Hunter, and Matthew. Thank you very much, folks. And we will finish up case 10 on the supplemental lab, and then we'll take a look at the case 9, and then we'll take a look at case 10. Thank you much, folks. Anybody have a question? Too late to add drop. Okay, have a good one. Yes. Huh? This is case number 9. Yes. Yeah, this is Action Plastics. And actually, this is Karma Digital. We did Action Plastics tonight. This is Karma Digital, case number 9. Yes, sir. Yeah.
And I had another question, sir. So sorry.
That's all right. Questions are fine.
Exam is about to upload my work in here. But what I will do with this?
Okay, you'll need to go over and take a look at the instructions for part 2 of the exam. Okay, and let me get back up here. And we'll go over to the assignments area.
Yes, sir.
I should have the instructions over there as well. Exam 1, part 2, upload your work here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and let me find it for you here just a minute. The files might be in the syllabus part.
I didn't see that.
Okay, let me work here. All right, let me go to the files here. Okay.
Is it here, right?
Yeah. There it is, exam 2, part 1. Okay, you see it? Instructions.
I got it, sir. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
yeah. That was up in BISS 1123, exam 1, part 2, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
that's all right. Okay, folks, we're done, and thank you for being here. And I'm going to stop the sharing unless somebody has a question out there. Anybody? If you do, you can pop me a, I've got everybody on mute. You can shoot me a chat. Anyone? Okay, folks, I'm going to mute you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And Allison, Carmen, Frankie, Hunter, and Matthew, have a great weekend. You betcha.